Alright, what we're going to do is we're going to do, you know what? Is that the same problem that we did? Let me see. Set 10. What was that number? 13 plus 3x. It's a little bit different. You know what I'm going to do, just for fun? I'm going to do that same exact problem that we did on that first video. But I'm not going to do it by completing the square. I'm going to do it by using the quadratic formula. And you can tell me, and basically we got two options. We have two options on how to solve this problem. We could do it by completing the square, and I'll set it up as a quadratic. I'll set it up in descending order to begin with. Alright, do you remember that? Alright, we did it just a few minutes ago. Let's do this, though, with the quadratic formula. So what I would do every single time you have a problem to do, if it says, like sometimes they'll say, use completing the square. Alright, so do it that way. Complete it by, by using, or solve it by completing the square. Then there'll be sometimes where they say, use the quadratic formula. So read the instructions and do it the way that they tell you to do it. Alright, it's good practice to do it both ways, and that's why they tell you specifically. It's not just about coming up with the answer every single time. It's about the process. Alright, so if it says do it by completing the square, then do it like we did a little earlier. If it says use a quadratic formula, then you're going to do it like we're going to do it right now. First thing I would do, if it says to use the formula, I would write the formula down. So here it is, x equals. Memorize it. I don't have any fancy tricks or anything to memorize it. You just have to write it down a whole bunch of times, and then by the time you write it down 10, 15 times, you'll probably have it memorized. Okay? So it's negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, and that whole thing, not just the square root, the whole thing is over 2a. I would write it down every single time they ask you to do this problem. I would write it down. Got it? Don't look at it in your notes and then just plug stuff in. Write the formula down. That way you're going to memorize it. So what's nice about this is, look, whatever the a is, what do? You stick it in wherever the a is. Whatever the b is over here, you stick it in where the b is. Whatever the c is, you stick it in wherever the c is. It's just a basic substitution problem now. Okay? So what is the a in this problem? We already talked about this earlier. I'm going to write it down. Sometimes, oops, I wanted to write this in red. Why didn't I go to red? Let's try it again. Okay, watch. Sometimes it's nice to do this. What is the a equal to? 3. What is the b? It's 1. And what is the c? It's 5. You see that? Sometimes people like to see it like that. Okay, maybe you don't need to do it, but I like to write it down like that. So let's do this. It's going to be x equals. It says negative b, or the opposite. That's what that negative right there means. It means the opposite of b. Well, b was 1, so what's the opposite of b? It's negative 1. Plus or minus square root b squared. We can do this in our head. What's 1 squared? It's just 1. Minus 4 times an a times a c. So let's put those numbers in. Our a was 3. Our c is 5. Right? It's just plug and chug, isn't it? I mean, this is like the definition of plug and chug. And then over 2a. So it's 2 times a. a is 3. And now all we do is just work this thing out. Just simplify it. That's all we have to do. All right? So it's really not learning a whole bunch of steps, is it? It's just plugging in and then just figuring it out, working it out. And some people like to do this better than learning the steps of completing the square. And eventually, I guess that'll be fine. Minus what? That's 12 times 5, which is 60. So it's 1 minus 60 over 2a, which is 6. Let's clean it up a little bit. It's negative 1 plus or minus square root of negative 59. Starting to look familiar, isn't it? Okay, and look what we have. It's negative 1 plus or minus square root of 59. What do we do with that negative inside the square root? Becomes an I. And that whole thing is over what? 6. Now, if you wanted to keep it like that, I would be okay with that. I wouldn't have a problem if you kept it like that. How do you think the book does it? They probably separate it, don't they? So, just in case you look in the back of the book and it looks like this, it means exactly the same thing, right? Same denominator and all that kind of thing. But why do they write it like this? Because it's a complex number. Because you have a real part and you have a what? Imaginary part. Now, not all these problems come out with an I. Sometimes the stuff inside of that square root comes out positive. All right? So you don't always have an I. So if it didn't have an I, I'd probably just keep it like this. All right? Either way, I would accept either way. I'm fine with that. All right? So if the book has this, that's fine. And if you have that, that's fine as well. for me. All right, you got to be careful though. Go to college, you might have a teacher that is going to be really picky about how you write your answer. So you just have to be aware of what they want and why they want it that way. All right. So it just all depends on how picky your teacher is about it. I'm not all that picky about it. You good? All right. Now that's only half of lesson 11. We got to do the other half of lesson 11 is a geometry lesson, completely different from this thing right here. But that's what they like to do in this book, in the Saxon book, is they like to mix things around, because I think that's a good idea instead of just staying with the same topic over and over again. Because if you get a job in any kind of technical field, do you just only concentrate on one thing and don't think of anything else? No, you got to fix this problem. Like if you're going to work on computers, you go to somebody's computer, generally you're working on computers, but you go to one guy and his problem is completely different from somebody else. And you have to be able to switch your mind and go from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other. You with me on that? I mean, it's all kinds of jobs. It's exactly the same kind of thing. You've got to be able to solve problems and be able to switch gears just like that, So that's what I believe. I really truly believe that Saxon does that for a reason. The reason he puts two completely separate topics in one lesson is because you have to practice. Your mind has to get into that mindset where, okay, I can jump from this to something completely different. My mind has got to be able to go from one topic to another and not just completely focus on one thing. Now, if you're working on a line in an assembly line or something like that, you're pretty much doing the same thing over and over and over again. But even then, I bet you have to solve problems. What if the thing breaks down, or you run out of parts, or this thing messes up, or whatever? You have to be on your toes. You got to be able to think, right, and be able to do all kinds. So even if you're working on a line and just putting a rivet or whatever you do, in the same spot the whole day, I bet you anything that there's all kinds of opportunities for you to think and to solve problems and to make things work a little bit better. So that's why they do what they do here. And I just like to point that out, because I've had teachers come to me, this book is crazy. The one lesson's got a geometry, and then in one lesson it's got geometry, and then it's got quadratic formula. They don't have anything to do with each other. Why do they do that? And I've had teachers come to me and say that, and I'm like, no, and I said, this is a good thing. This really helps the student think, and it helps them be able to jump from one topic to the other. It really does. So anyway, there you go. So work on lesson 11. You should be able to do most of problem set 11 today. All right. There's only a few things. Let's see, the circles. The geometry part was circles. There's like there's like 3 problems, 5, 6, and 7 that you probably won't be able to do as far as the new stuff. And again, whenever it says to prove, I'm okay with you skipping the proofs. All right. But everything else you should be able to do. All right. So work on that tonight, and we'll look at circles tomorrow.